CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome back to the CyberHub Podcast, Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025. Hope everyone had a great Labor Day weekend. If you missed our show yesterday, it was a packed show. In fact, it was so packed that some of the stories today that we wanted to cover today, we actually covered yesterday, like on some of the major sites. So the stuff you're reading is a day old. If you want it in short form and with some commentary, you can go check out yesterday's episode on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, X, wherever you get your content as you're watching us. All right, or listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. All right, today's show, packed. We're going to be talking about this Salesforce sales loft drift fallout because it's significant. So we're going to get into that here in just a moment. Before we do, episode 972 today, which means I've had 972 double espressos with all of y'all, which is a lot. Probably still drink a lot more than that. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. Yeah, when we get the timing, when I make the espresso just right, it's the perfect temperature when I drink it with y'all that I just take a little longer sip. The days where I take a small sip, I'm telling you what it is. It's so hot, it burns my tongue. All right. So this whole thing has been attributed to Salesforce. It's not Salesforce's fault. So talked about it yesterday on the show, and I talked about it in detail. But here's what's happening. A lot of companies use Salesforce. Salesforce, the leading kind of sales tool, and does so much more today, right? SalesLoft, which upon research figured out it's a Atlanta-based company. They're actually in Buckhead at Atlanta Tech Village, and they've created a bot called Drift, and it's an AI chat agent. It integrates with Salesforce, and it's able to help kind of promote sales effectively. The effective use of AI, stuff we were concerned about with AI. Well, in order for this agent to actually operate, it needs OAuth and refresh tokens in order to gain access to customer Salesforce environments. This is where attackers targeted. So you may have you as a company, if you have Salesforce and SalesLoft, you have both. And those are both third parties, but these third parties, SalesLoft is relying on Salesforce, right? So SalesLoft needs to access Salesforce. Salesforce allows that to take place, obviously, because you approve it within your environment. SalesLoft, for their end, apparently didn't really have a good strategy around OAuth and refresh tokens, which allowed the threat actors to get that. And that leads us to this morning's story, and there's a few of these. And these are companies near and dear to my heart. Zscaler being the first, suffering a data breach and now reporting it after their SalesLoft Drift AI chat agent, which integrates with Salesforce's OAuth and refresh tokens, were stolen by the attackers. Zscaler, says that the Salesforce instance was impacted by the supply chain attack exposing customer information. As part of the campaign, the unauthorized actor gained access to the SalesLoft Drift credentials for its customers, including Zscaler. A detailed review and as part of their ongoing investigations, they've determined that this is some of the information that was stolen: names, business email addresses, job titles, phone numbers, regional location details, Zscaler product licensing, and commercial information and content from certain support cases. The company stresses that the data breach only impacts its Salesforce instance and no Zscaler products, services, or any of its infrastructure. Fair to assume that to be the case there. And again, this goes to showing just how these third and fourth party companies are integrated into a piece of data, and that sometimes I'm not saying security teams didn't pay attention at Zscaler. I know a lot of people at Zscaler, a very, very skilled group of people at Zscaler. But these fourth and fifth parties that integrate with your main third parties probably need to go under greater scrutiny. Hello to Jay Harris on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. All right, we'll move to Palo Alto because they also apparently use Salesforce and they also use SalesLoft Drift. Unbelievable. The company states it's one of hundreds of companies affected by the supply chain attack that was started getting disclosed last week. And again, we've talked about so many organizations that have been impacted by this sales loft drift breach. Bleeping Computer learning of the breach over the weekend that Palo Alto customers expressed concern that the breach exposed sensitive information like IT information, passwords, and shared in support tickets, but Palo Alto saying this was only limited to their Salesforce CRM. It didn't impact any products, systems, or services. In the advisory published yesterday by Palo Alto, they say that the stolen data includes business contact details, internal sales contact information, and basic case data from support cases created by customers. Again, this campaign is being tracked by Google's threat intelligence team. And we see this kind of stuff there. Google and Palo Alto said the threat actors use automated tools to steal data, with user agent strings indicating that some are custom tools, as you can see here, to evade detection. They also deleted logs and used Tor to obfuscate their origins. Palo Alto stated that it invoked the associated tokens and rotated credentials following the incidents. So since the beginning of the year, Salesforce has been the target of data theft attacks. Again, so let's just move from the hype. This Salesforce attack reminds me very much of what happened to Snowflake last year. Snowflake wasn't breached last year. Snowflake's customers who didn't have MFA were breached because their credentials were compromised. Hence, Salesforce wasn't breached. Salesforce had nothing to do with this breach at all. Any mention of Salesforce as being anything other than the conduit and the additional victim, the multiple victims of this cyber attack, would be at best malicious. Salesforce, for their end, and this kind of goes into the discussion, the balance of responsibility within your supply chain. If Salesforce allows SalesLoft to access their data, should there be some sort of standard or oversight that Salesforce should enforce, or does that fall back on you, the customer? And in most cases today, that falls back on you, the customer, to say, I want to integrate SalesLoft into my Salesforce. And Salesforce goes, all right, sign off on the risk. And most people signed off on the risk. But no one really did a thorough review. I'm not saying this would have been found by a thorough review, and anyone who says otherwise is lying. It's false. But it goes back to the idea that our markets are intertwined, and you're seeing this with the amount of companies that are using SalesLoft Drift in their Salesforce environment that are coming forward. I mean, folks, we've talked about Google yesterday. We talked about Cisco and Farmers and Workday and Adidas and Qantas and Allianz Life, Louis Vuitton, Dior, Palo Alto, Zscaler. We can keep going. It's significant, right? And it just shows you how much control we need to have over our supply chain and our third parties. And I know the question here: how much control is enough? And where do I have to draw the line? I don't know. I mean, do I have to go deep into every single vendor? I mean, we categorize our vendors, right? High, medium, low. We kind of give them categories. What data are they accessing based on the data they access, the stuff they do? Somewhere here, we lost track of this. All right. Somewhere here, we lost track of this. Thank you for the great comment, Jay Harris. Again, really appreciate it. So we have that there. All right. We'll continue with the WhatsApp 0-day. So if you're an Apple user like myself, you want to make sure you get this updated. This impacts Apple's iOS, iPadOS, and macOS products, all on the WhatsApp. So if you're using WhatsApp kind of on your desktop, on your MacBook as an app, you want to make sure you get that updated ASAP. This 0-day is being actively exploited at CV 2025-55177. It's an incomplete authorization of linked device synchronization messages. We talked about it yesterday on the show, but it's now been patched, but it is being actively exploited. So make sure you get this patched up. Researchers are flagging a Ukrainian IP network for engaging in massive brute force and password spraying campaigns targeting SSL VPNs and RDP devices between June and July of this year. The activity originated from Ukraine-based autonomous system FDN3, Per French cybersecurity company Intrinsec, they believe with high level of confidence that FDN3 is part of a wider abusive infrastructure of two other Ukrainian networks, Vise AS, and I'm not going to be able to say this next one. It's Irishania ASN, and a Seychelles-based autonomous system named TKNet. According to the report, they were all allocated in August of 2021 and often exchange IPv4 prefixes with one another to evade blocklisting and continuing hosting abusive activities. The two anonymous systems were allocated in May and August of 2021. A major chunk of their prefixes have been announced on AS 210848 and another autonomous system that also was allocated in August of 2021, showing you just how these things are set up, right? And there's a bunch of shell companies like Global Internet Solutions LLC or Global Connectivity Solutions, Vercel IP, Volume Inc., and Telecom Internet. The findings build upon prior disclosures about how multiple networks allocated in August of 2021 and based in the Ukraine and Seychelles were used for spam distribution, network attacks, malware command and control hosting. Some of the IP4 prefixes announced by these networks were moved to FDN3, which was also created, guess what, in August of 2021. So what does all of this say? Well, we talk about trust a lot on the show, but what this shows you is these threat actors leverage specific systems and offshore facilities where there's not as much oversight or control. And then from there, they base it and they build these attacks over time. Hello to Ankit. So we do that as well. So something to keep in mind there as you're overlooking it. And by the way, Ukraine's always been a cyber hotbed. Always been a cyber hotbed. Irregardless to the political situation and what you feel about the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine has always been where Russians and other international actors go to launch cyber attacks. That hasn't changed. Hasn't changed one bit because of the war. It still happens in Western Ukraine, targeting the rest of the globe directly from there. All right. So just mind you, Eastern Ukraine, war-torn, absolute tragedy, loss of life, you name it. Western Ukraine, cyber hotbed. Ukraine's a very, very big country. All right. For those who don't know, a newly disclosed security vulnerability tracked the CVE 2025-0165 has been reported concerning users of IBM's Watson X Orchestrate cartridge within the IBM Cloud Pak for Data platform. The flaw, officially acknowledged in a security bulletin released on the 31st of August by IBM, enables blind SQL injection attacks, potentially allowing authenticated attackers to manipulate or access sensitive data stored in the backend database. So again, blind SQL attacks means that you don't really see the query, even though the attackers may be able to see the results directly. The flaw impacts multiple versions of Watson X Orchestrate cartridge for IBM Cloud Pak for Data, specifically versions 4.8.4 through 4.8.5 and 5.0.0 through 5.2. So you want to make sure you run the current version there as well. A threat actors have been using multiple websites promoted through Google Ads to distribute a convincing PDF editing app that delivers an info stealing malware called TamperedChef. The campaign is part of a larger operation with multiple apps that can download each other, some of them tricking users into enrolling their systems into residential proxies. More than 50 domains have been identified to host deceiving apps signed with fraudulent certificates issued by at least 4 different companies. And again, InfoStealers, the main goal, remember how cybercrime is decentralized. InfoStealers are essentially the tool for those initial access brokers. They stick them in. They want to steal credentials. They want to steal as much information as humanly possible. They want to map out a network so they know how to attack. And the moment they realize they know how to do that, they go about it. You have to be able to block InfoStealers from your environment. Tools already exist, firewall settings as well as UEBA, user behavior analytics. So all of that is there as well. So this campaign talks about distribution methods and so much more. Again, they're doing it in Google Ads. So they're paying Google to run these ads for these malicious sites, for these malicious programs that then users trust because they see it on Google Ads, hence the flaw in Google's model that we continually talk about here on the show. All right, let's wrap up here. 2 more stories, folks. A malicious NPM package that comes with a stealthy feature to inject malicious code into desktop apps for crypto wallets like Atomic and Exodus on Windows system has been discovered. The package named Node.js SMTP impersonates the legitimate email library Node Mailer with an identical tagline, page styling, and even README description, attracting a total of only 347 downloads since it was uploaded in April of 2025 by a user named Nico Timon. It's no longer available, but the main objective was to override the recipient address with hard-coded wallets controlled by the threat actor, redirecting Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tether, XRP, and Solana transactions, acting as a cryptocurrency clipper. That package has now been taken offline. You want to make sure you do that review. And the Spanish government in Europe waking up to the fact that China is a threat, canceling a 10 million euro contract or $11.7 million to Huawei, now awarding it to Red Iris Networks, removing Huawei out of their environment. The Red Iris upgrade using Huawei equipment had been negotiated directly with Telefonica, as the company had an existing 5.5 million contract from 2020 to boost the network. They've argued that the new upgrade was urgent due to demands of new digital services, supercomputing projects, and the network connection to Spain's defense establishment. These fears are often expressed in the context of Beijing's offensive cyber espionage activities and China's National Intelligence Law of 2017, which allows the state to compel anyone in China to do anything. The company is currently restricted from most 5G networks across the EU, although Spain had opted out of imposing such restrictions. And Spain has its own issues. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is extremely unpopular. The dude is headed on a collection on a path, so they've canceled this contract now, likely because of pressure from other EU nations. So we'll see how they replace it. Good news there. At least countries are waking up to the fact that China should be nowhere near our telecom, critical infrastructure. We have to build a separate supply chain. It's kind of been what President Trump's talked about, bringing some of this manufacturing home so that at least on the critical aspects of our infrastructure, we have control and not the Chinese. Kind of agree with that. That's it for our show today. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern with the latest updates. If you go to cyberhubpodcast.com, shortly after the show's over, we send you an email summarizing the show with code to action, everything else you need. It's brilliant. It's great. It's easy. People love it. So you can go subscribe to cyberhubpodcast.com. We don't spam you with anything else, just these emails. You'll get them every single day after the show, and then a Friday summary there as well. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.